Hi there. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Serena Gruya, the Public Engagement Coordinator with Albemarle County. I'm going to give a high-level overview of our comprehensive plan and the update process, which is called AC44. First, a brief introduction to the comprehensive plan, starting with what it is and what it's used for. The comprehensive plan is a 20-year guiding document that describes our community's vision for the future. It includes the recreation, transportation, housing, and job opportunities we want to see. It is collaboratively created by community members, staff, and elected and appointed officials, such as the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors. The recommendations in the plan are organized by goals, objectives, and strategies for each plan topic. Each level of recommendation becomes increasingly detailed, and at the strategy level can include specific projects or infrastructure improvements. Here, you can see different plans and their time horizons. The comp plan has the longest time horizon and serves as a guide for shorter-term plans. The strategic plan has a 5-year time horizon that serves as a roadmap for how we're going to make near-term progress to achieve the community's vision for the future, recognizing that it takes time to implement the comp plan. This plan includes funding strategies and program development. The annual budget is a 12-month implementation-oriented plan to get things done to advance their strategic plan. It includes staff salaries, equipment, maintenance, renovations, new public buildings and facilities, and program support. It's the shovels in hands to deliver services. Sometimes we hear confusion about the difference between comp plan and zoning. The comprehensive plan is different from the zoning ordinance. As I mentioned, the plan includes recommendations and serves as a guide for staff and elected officials to make land use and other policy decisions. The zoning ordinance is a chapter of the county code, and it's the law. AC44 is the name of the process for updating the comp plan, which is expected to be completed in late 2024 and be a vision for the next 20 years until 2044. There will be periodic updates to the plan along the way, consistent with state code requirements and changing conditions in the county. As for the answer to why now, well, the state requires localities to have an updated comprehensive plan. Since the comp plan was most recently updated in 2015, the county has continued to grow and change, and plan content needs to be updated to integrate new plans and policies around climate action, housing, economic development, and transportation, among others. There are 4 phases for the comp plan update, and each phase has an increasing level of detail as plan recommendations are drafted. The project started with the big ideas and visioning and will end with the adoption of the plan in 2024. AC44 is currently at the beginning of Phase 2, which kicked off at the end of January. The result of Phase 1 was the framework for an equitable and resilient community. These are principles to guide the development of the goals, objectives, and actions in the plan. The framework started out as 4 big ideas and was developed and refined with community, staff, planning commission, and board input, and incorporates the board's initiatives for equity and climate action. The framework guides us toward creating a community that is green and resilient, welcoming and equitable, connected and accessible, and thriving and prosperous. This graphic shows us how the different components of the framework seek to guide the components of the comprehensive plan. At the end of the day, we want the goals, objectives, and strategies to reflect our community's ideals. Phase 2 will last about a year for the entirety of 2023. In Step 1, we reviewed existing conditions and recent trends for each plan topic. Community members were asked about challenges and opportunities and priorities on those topics. In Step 2, we will draft planning toolkits. In the future, planning toolkits will be used by staff to evaluate proposed development. We will also discuss potential growth management options and how those relate to coordinated transportation and land use planning. Recommendations for land use, transportation, and growth management are important for guiding how and where the county develops, including the mix of uses and the options for walking, biking, transit, and driving. In step 3, we will continue to refine and develop the toolkits and share goals and objectives for community review and feedback. At the end of phase 2, there will be updated goals and objectives for each comp plan topic. After phase 2, we will move into developing ways to help us implement the goals and objectives of the plan. This may include policies, infrastructure improvements, or planning efforts. In the fourth phase, we will put together a final comprehensive plan document, which will be reviewed by the Planning Commission and adopted by the Board of Supervisors during a public hearing. Okay, now that you've been briefed on the comprehensive plan, let's talk about the open houses. At the open houses, we'll ask for your input on ways we can implement the AC44 framework for an equitable and resilient community, focusing on the built environment, centers of activity that foster a sense of community, multimodal transportation, and planning for future growth. The topics we'll cover are areas that can help us implement coordinated land use and transportation planning, support the growth management policy, and where more focused community input is needed. As you consider the questions, also think about how the topics can help us make our community green and resilient, welcoming and equitable, connected and accessible, and thriving and prosperous. At the first station, learn about activity centers in the development areas. Activity centers are places that have a variety of businesses, services, and housing, either now or in the future, where we can gather, shop, stroll, and go to meet our daily needs. At this station, there will be a series of maps of each of the county's development areas with draft activity center locations shown. These draft activity centers were identified by analyzing existing development patterns, known planned projects, and development area master plans, and current and future estimates for jobs and people. There are fewer total activity centers shown compared with the total centers in the master plans, as many of the master plan centers are not mixed use, such as a park or a single commercial building. Each draft activity center also has a draft center place type, either neighborhood, town, or destination center. All activity center types are expected to be walkable and mixed use, though they vary in recommendations for form and scale. For example, a neighborhood center may have some neighborhood shops and a parklet, while a destination center may have office buildings with restaurants and shops on the ground floor and a large public plaza. The draft activity center place types provide guidance on building form and scale, transportation, parking, and open space. We're asking you for your input on the draft activity center locations, the draft activity center place types, and the transportation network to connect centers and neighborhoods. At the second station, learn about draft criteria for evaluating when an expansion of the development areas may be needed, and if an expansion is found to be needed, how locations for expansion could be selected. The current growth management policy designates both development areas, which are currently approximately 5% of the county, or 37 square miles, and the rural area, which is currently approximately 95% of the county, or 689 square miles. The majority of residential, office, commercial, and industrial growth is directed to the development areas, while the rural area is primarily for agriculture and forestry land uses, with limited residential development. The current comprehensive plan has recommendations for the timing of future expansion, but does not have guidance for where and how to expand. We need your input on what additional criteria should be considered with the comp plan update for monitoring the land capacity in our development areas, planning for future housing and employment needs, and finding locations should an expansion be found to be needed in the future. At the third station, learn about current comp plan recommendations for crossroads communities in the rural area and why we could consider updating recommendations. Crossroads communities are places in the rural area that have a historic, small commercial center, typically at a literal crossroads. Crossroads communities are meant to provide support services and opportunities to engage in community life for rural area community members. The current comprehensive plan encourages land uses such as country stores, offices, daycare, doctor and dentist offices, and community centers in crossroads communities, though additional zoning ordinance updates would be needed to allow for many of these uses. While the current comp plan recognizes 7 crossroads communities, there are many additional communities in the rural area that are active and that have gathering places with rural and historic character. We need your input to help identify these places and document and share their histories. We're asking for your input on whether updates are needed to the comp plan recommendations for crossroads communities and how we could best use potential community hubs. At the 4th station, learn about current comp plan recommendations for rural interstate interchanges and why we could consider updating recommendations. The current plan identifies 4 rural interstate interchanges. These are I-64 interstate interchanges that are located in the rural area. Both the Yancey Mills and Shadwell interchanges have existing commercial and industrial development, while the Black Cat Road and Ivy interchanges have very limited residential development. The current plan recommends that land uses at these interchanges should primarily be agriculture and forestry uses and uses that support ag and forestry. It discourages providing public water and sewer to these locations and discourages tourist destinations or shops. We're looking for your input on whether changes are needed to the current comp plan recommendations or whether no or only minimal changes are needed at this time. So, thank you for being here. And at this open house, you'll watch this introduction. Good job watching the introduction. And then we'll invite you to walk around. So visit each of the 4 stations and review the information. We have a variety of posters on hand that you can look at maps and read information. We'll ask you to ask questions. You'll encounter a lot of information on the tour, so staff are excited to speak with you and answer questions and clarify concepts and terms. And finally, we'll ask you to share feedback. Each station has a place for you to share feedback on Post-its and to answer questions. Thank you for sticking around and learning about the comprehensive plan. To learn more and participate online, please visit our project website at engage.albemarle.org/AC44.